ladies and gentlemen, now hosting the RizzoCast, put your hands together for Steven Risotto!
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back. I'm doing this intro with no microphone and gum in my mouth, so bear with me here for the next minute or so. My name is Steven Risotto. I cover the San Francisco Giants for SF Bay, and I'm the host of RizzoCast, a podcast that features current and former big league players, coaches, fans, media, and others who are regarded as some of the brightest minds around the game of baseball. Today's guest is Grant Green, a former MLB infielder who played in parts of 5 seasons at the big league level with the A's, Angels, Nationals, and Giants. He was drafted in the first round, 13th overall in 2009 by the A's out of USC. Green has kind of had the unique opportunity to be a college superstar, head through the minor leagues as a first-round pick, and play with 2 of the greatest players ever on his hometown team. Pretty cool. He's working right now in the financial advising industry in Texas. We talk about that, his career, so much more coming up next on RizzoCast. This is episode number 144. And without further ado, let's get started. All right, we are back with Grant Green, and Grant is nice enough to join the show. Grant, how you doing? Welcome. How you doing? How you doing twice, I guess? What's going on?
I'm doing good. Just kind of hanging out in Texas now. Moved out from Southern California out here with my wife, and starting a family and just enjoying life. So.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. And you're a few years removed from being an active player. And I always ask former big league players this kind of at the top of the show, and I'll ask you too. I know you're a busy guy. You mentioned trying to start a family in Texas, doing some other stuff as well. How much baseball are you getting around to watching these days? A lot? Not a lot? Where's your gauge on the current game?
When I first stopped playing, I didn't watch very much of it. Unless I had a couple buddies that were playing. Like I still have a good buddy of mine, Brad Boxberger, that plays with the Cubs. Unless it was to kind of watch him, I didn't watch very much. Now that I have a son, I'm starting to get back into it. Starting to watch more and more, especially more college. I watched a lot of the College World Series, kind of when I could get him to focus, even though he's only 14 months. We kind of watched quite a bit of it, and then I'm starting to watch a little bit more of Major League Baseball. Unless it's the playoffs, I don't watch as much, but with the Rangers kind of doing what they're doing, it's becoming more fun to watch out here. So,
yeah, does your son have like a bat in his hand yet, or is he throwing anything yet? Like, is that something that you envision down the line, like maybe coaching one of his teams as time goes on?
Oh yeah, I mean he's got a bat in his hand 24/7 through 5. As much as I can put it in there and mom allows me to do it, I kind of put it in his hand. We're trying to learn the throw. It's not the greatest right now, but we prefer to kick baseballs now, but we'll get there.
Definitely. Well, there's still a lot of time left. So I mentioned the current game, and it's a little bit of a different style game, and you might have seen this while watching the College World Series too. There's a lot more pitching, a lot more power, a lot more information, a lot more data. All of it's kind of grown since you last put on a uniform. Is that something that you would embrace, kind of the new changes that have been put into the game with the new hitting approach, all the information, the velocity? How do you think you would fare, I guess, today's day and age?
I guess you kind of take it with the ebbs and flows. I mean, there's parts of it I like. Obviously, I wish I kind of had more of the thought process of positioning on defense. I mean, we did have that, but it wasn't to this extent. And I think that, has really helped defensively. The part of the game that I'm not the biggest fan on is the all or nothing. I'm sure you've talked with a lot of people that are ex-big leaguers or ex-professional athletes, and they're not the biggest fans of it. But, it's kind of how the game has changed now. You even see it in basketball where everything's a three-pointer or nothing. But with that being said, I mean, some of the players today are still some of the greatest players on the planet. And, if that's the way the game's going, you kind of have to adjust. I think at some point it's going to course correct and we'll get back to, the number being that everyone's striving for is 300 rather than 25 homers. But until then, I mean, this is the game we have. This is the game I always loved playing and watching. So as much as I'm not the biggest fan of it, I still, have to be okay with it. So.
Yeah, and I understand like, batting average maybe not being as relevant, not being an end all be all to a hitter, but like nobody's going to look at the scoreboard and see 220 and be okay with it, because you still got to look at it every night when you're in the box. So I'm sure that that's going to change, and a lot of guys are probably not happy with the batting average despite what the game is kind of trending to.
I mean, I would hope so, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, some of them have to be okay with it because they haven't decided to change their approach. I mean, you have guys that are constantly in the big leagues hitting below 220, but yet they hit 30 homers, and for them, it's okay. So, I mean, I guess for them, I guess hitting 220 or below is okay. So, I mean, unless you're going to show me that, you're going to change your approach and actions speak louder than words, to me, it says that, you're okay with not hitting the ball very well and, just every now and then getting a hold of one and then celebrating it like you just won game 7 of the World Series. So.
Yeah, no, 100%. And let's kind of get into your career a little bit. I know you're Southern California guy, born in the Fullerton area, went to high school in Anaheim. How far back did you go with baseball, and why was it something that you were kind of drawn to from the get-go?
Oh shoot, sure as everyone, 2 or 3 years old. Playing t-ball. I have an older brother that I always remember going to his t-ball games and trying to strive to be like him. Um, so I mean, it's back as long as I can remember, and it's always just was one of those things. It was either that or basketball. My dad was a big basketball guy. He played at Cal State LA. Ended up when he got done playing, touring with the Globetrotters as part of the Washington Generals as a team against them. So he was a big basketball guy, coached basketball, and it was one of those things that when I was in 8th grade, it's just kind of lost the love of basketball and stuck with baseball. And thankfully I did because I had a good career out of it. But it was just something that I always kind of leaned towards because my dad was a big Giants fan growing up, so we always watched them and just trying to strive to be like my brother who was a baseball guy through and through.
So you're let me get this straight. Your dad was on the one of the opposing teams that the Globetrotters play. So do they have to do like anything crazy? Do they just like, go out there and like supplement what the Globetrotters are doing? Like how does that work?
I don't know. I mean, it was such a long time ago. I just remember my dad always telling me, he used to tour with them, go always go to across the ocean over in Europe and Asia and Australia. He ended up was on a movie with them actually. Was what was it? The Harlem Globetrotters go to Gilligan's Island. And so they
Okay.
ended up facing this, these robots, and my dad was one of the robots in the movie or something. And so it was one of those experiences that he absolutely thoroughly enjoyed, and always got it, had some cool stories to tell us, when we were growing up. So it was always really, really nice.
Yeah, that is interesting because I don't know if you've seen the clips of the Savannah Bananas. But I
Oh,
always think in my head because I'm gonna go see them at the end of this month in Sacramento, and I always think like, who do they play? Like, who's the
yeah.
opponent on the other side of this? And I guess I'm gonna find out. But that's kind of interesting that your dad has that background. Um, in your bio at USC, and you're gonna laugh at this. You said that your favorite movie was Shawshank Redemption, and your favorite TV shows were One Tree Hill and CSI. Is all of this still true?
Yes, I still watch Shawshank Redemption every single time it's on TNT or TBS. Me and my wife actually were when we had our newborn, our son, and it was like nap times for him. We actually finished watching and rewatching One Tree Hill from beginning to end. So yes, no, it's still through and through. We watch it all the time. CSI, I don't watch it as much anymore. I'm more of a Criminal Minds now, kind of evolved into that. But yeah, no, those shows are still some of my favorites, and still watch them as much as I can.
And this is also funny. You also said that you enjoy listening to Led Zeppelin, Tupac, and Toby Keith. And that, like, what variety is that? That's like everything under the sun.
So it was Led Zeppelin because that's what my dad always listened to, is classic rock, and we used to always listen to the Let the Let Out hour. It was on KLOS. It was an hour from like 4 to 5 or 5 to 6. It was only Led Zeppelin.
Wow.
And we used to listen to that every single time going to and from baseball practices, games, or whatever it may be. My brother was a big, classic hip hop fan and rap fan, so listened to a lot of, Tupac and Biggie and Dre with him. And then, just at the time, I was just starting to get into country, playing baseball more and more when I got into college, and you start to, get that country roots of baseball and all that. So it's just a lot more country. And at the time, Toby Keith was the man. So I, enjoyed listening to him as well.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself very cultured because of your music taste?
Oh yeah. I mean, I actually got to a point where at the end of my career, I would listen to Frank Sinatra on the ride home after every game, just to kind of wind down. So a lot of Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, all of those people, and Louis Armstrong. So it's just started listening to anything and everything, and just depending on my mood. And so yeah, I would say I'm kind of cultured.
Yeah, love the music tastes. Now back to baseball real quick. You mentioned college baseball, and I'm glad you brought that up. Because I personally think it should be a lot bigger nationally. We make a big deal out of college football, rightfully so. March Madness is big in March, but baseball kind of seems to be that third fiddle in the summer. I mean, how does that get changed? Do you think that the baseball world is kind of doing a better job at putting these kids on higher, I guess, higher stages nationally with ESPN, the broadcast deal, and everything? How do we get college baseball kind of in a bigger spotlight than it is now?
No, exactly like you said, it's just more broadcasting of the game, kind of reach more audiences. I mean, if you look at March Madness, you look at college football. I mean, you could watch almost every single game at any single time, and you don't have that with college baseball. And I mean, I can understand it. I mean, a lot of people find baseball to be slow, and it's not one of those sports that you're going to watch and see action 24/7. It's more of the analytical game, the more of the analytical fan that can enjoy the ins and outs of what happens in a baseball game. The other thing I think that, the only way that you're going to get more fans to kind of jump on the bandwagon, and I actually hope they never do this, but it would be to stop high school kids from going in the draft. I think that, baseball is one of those sports that in 17, 18-year-old can actually compete with, the 24, 25-year-olds. With that being said, if you made them all go to college, you're just going to have a better pool of, athletes that are there, and, it's going to be a better game to watch. But like I said, with that being said, I hope they never do that. I think, high school kids, if you're mature enough to be able to go into the draft and you can, see it as a job and, not just something I play, but truly is, you got to put in the time, you got to put in the effort, you got to put in the work, go right ahead and show everybody what you can do.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I've not heard that aspect of it, but yeah, I hope that doesn't happen either. That's kind of a weird thing to happen. So at USC, I mean, you completely tore it up at USC, and Pac-10 honors and Baseball America awards all over the place, and the national recognition, and you hear this chatter about destined for the first round, destined for the first round, and I feel like we don't ask athletes this enough, but did any of that pressure kind of weigh on you a little bit? Did you kind of start becoming someone you weren't? What was that pressure like of those moments kind of right before the draft?
Not right before the draft. For me, it was beginning of the season. I started off my junior year extremely, extremely slow. And I think I was hitting like 220 through like the first 13 games. I kind of had the pressure there, and it got to a point where I had to sit down with my advisor at the time and my pops and our head coach and a couple other people, and kind of just have them sit me down and kind of almost have an intervention of, hey, we understand that you're putting too much pressure on yourself. Just kind of go out there and just treat it as another Friday game. Whatever happens, happens. It is what it is. You've already put in the time, the effort, the work that, what's ever going to happen this year is going to happen this year. You can't control it. And so that kind of really helped. I would give advice to any kid that's out there. I didn't really learn most of this until I got to a point in my career where I was a guy that was called up and sent down all the time. Of control the controllable. You can't control where you're going to go in the draft. You can't control what team's going to like you. If you're a hitter, you can't control once you put the barrel on the ball what's going to happen. All you can control is putting in the time, putting in the work, putting in the effort, and putting on good swings, running hard down the line, making sure, when you're about to field a ball, that you're in the right position. That's all you can control. So just control the controllable, and, whatever happens will. And, if you put in all the stuff that you need to put in, more often than not, you're going to be rewarded.
And one of the things that is kind of a staple on this podcast, I always ask guys about their draft stories and kind of what they were doing, where they were. The A's pick you in the 13th round in 2009. This, I believe, was the first year that it might have been telecast, or this first or second year it might have been telecasted. What were you doing? I'm sure that first rounder, there might have been a lot of people around you. Tell me about that draft story and getting that phone call and getting the notice that you were picked by the A's.
Yeah, actually, mine was really, really laid back. I literally was just at home with my immediate family, and that was it. We were kind of watching the draft on TV because it was the first year that they ever had it, and there was only one person at the draft that year, and that was Trout, because he was from the area.
He had to sweat a little bit too, huh?
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, it was one of those things of, my agent had called me, or advisor at the time, since I hadn't signed, yet, so we couldn't been an agent, but told me at the time that, it was maybe this team here, and if not, then it was going to be the A's at 13, and if it wasn't them, then it may be the back half of the first round. It was just one of those things of, again, you couldn't control what was going to happen, so it was just more of just kind of sitting there. And then once I got the call from Billy Beane, it was, obviously surreal and life-changing, and a lot of cheerings in the house. My dad went out and bought, A's hats for the whole family, right then and there. So, but yeah, mine for the most part was just more laid back. We just had, just immediate family at the house. We didn't have any, crazy party or anything. And then I think we went out and maybe had dinner. I don't even remember. That's how kind of low key it was. So.
Yeah, I forgot who it was, but somebody had mentioned that they were in a college class and they kept declining the call, and that's the worst thing that could possibly happen. But there's a few good ones mixed in. And something that I notice every year with the draft, and it kind of pisses me off, is when guys get drafted and they're playing up the middle in college or high school, there's always the question that pops up is can they stick there? Can a center fielder stay in center? Can a shortstop stay at shortstop? Can a catcher stay behind the plate? And I mean, how much of a priority was it for you to kind of work with the A's and make sure that, hey, I want to play shortstop as long as I can, as long as I can make this work? Because that's always a question, can you stay at these positions up the middle? So was that ever a question when the A's picked you, of staying at short?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it was. I mean, you have a very small portion of people when they get drafted, especially if they're at one of those key positions, like you said, short, center, catcher, that are going to stay there. I mean, off the top of my head, you look at people like Correa. You knew he was going to stay there. You look at Posey. You knew he was going to stay there. Trout in center. You kind of knew he was going to stay there. So, I mean, there was always that question of, being drafted where I was, is he going to be able to stay there? He's taller than normal shortstops. He doesn't have the quick lateral movement, but he can get going. Once he gets going, he can do it. So it was always a priority of mine to try to stick there as long as I could. I wish I would have stuck there longer than I did, but I was happy with my career. Even being a utility guy, I got to play a lot of different positions, which helped me out, helped me, learn different things that you have to learn to play second or third or first or left, center, whatever it may be. And, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But at the end of the day, if I could have stuck there, I wish I could have.
And you'd mentioned, the advising that you had, in the draft. And I got to ask a question about Scott Boras, because a lot of people have different opinions on him. What is he like to work with? Because we always hear about the big names, the big contracts that he gets. And he's honestly whatever you think about him, he's the most successful at his job that there's ever been in baseball. Nobody will come close to him in the foreseeable future. So what was kind of like the relationship, working with him? And I'm sure trying to find an agent is like probably stressful for a lot of guys. But what was that kind of relationship like with an agent?
I mean, I couldn't have had a better relationship with him. I was extremely lucky that my junior year, his son was actually at SC and was a freshman. So he came to all my games, and I got really, really close with him. I know a lot of people that may have been in my situation with Scott. Maybe don't have the nicest things to say about him, and that's their prerogative. But I could not say nicer things about him. I would never say anything negative about him. He was, again, the nicest agent I've, obviously I only had one, but he was the nicest agent I've ever seen. Like you said, he's the pinnacle of the agency world. But for me, he was amazing. I actually would have loved to have gone and worked for his company when all it was all said and done. Just, it just didn't work out. But yeah, I mean, I loved it. I wouldn't have traded it for the world. And I had a chance to, possibly move agencies when it got to a point where, I was kind of a guy up and down where, maybe they would have been able to put a little bit more, maybe thought into, getting me a contract or something. But, with the way he always treated me, there was no shot in heck I was ever going to leave him, just because, again, he was almost like a second, father figure in my baseball life. So.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And is that something that you would be interested in, like kind of working back in baseball as like representing someone? Is that something that you would want?
I mean, obviously that I would love to get back into baseball, and that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm in the finance world as an advisor, and my goal is to, at some point, is to work with as many clients as possible. Have as many baseball clients as I can to not only help them navigate the finance side of, what what the game can bring for you, or because what most people don't realize is that a lot of people don't get to have the first or second contracts. And so, whatever they sign for, that's pretty much probably the big money they're going to get for their whole life, just like I was. And we have to, strategically find a way to make sure that lasts forever. So, I mean, that's something that, like I said, like I always want to work with baseball people, or athletes in general. But I also think that, being able to do that and being able to do what I've done, kind of have a different insight to what their lifestyles are. And so, while yes, I would love to get back into the game, whether it be, for an agency like Scott's, or, maybe, even a front office with the Rangers or something like that. Where I'm at right now, I love it. I enjoy helping people, understand something that a lot of people don't understand in the finance world, and how portfolios work, and how do we make sure we, save enough money for retirement or college savings or whatever it may be. But I would like to get to a point where I can work with as many, minor league, big leaguers as possible.
And Scott, first of all, if Scott's listening, because I know he is, maybe, get Grant a job. And second of all, come on the show, Scott. So let's kind of get back into, I guess, kind of your career based on the numbers in high school and college, and entering into pro ball. I'd imagine there's been very little experience of like, baseball failure until you got to pro ball. Did you kind of feel that way too?
No, not really. I mean, I don't even really think I failed much in my pro career. I mean, if you look at my minor league numbers, I mean, I think up until my last season, I was like a 320 hitter in the minor leagues or something like that. Even in the big leagues, when I had good stretches of games that I could play, I hit very well. There was a point where I was with Anaheim and I got sent down hitting like 370 in the big leagues. But it got to a point where Calhoun came off the DL, Josh Hamilton got off the DL, Howie Kendrick came off the DL. So it's like, okay, I understand it's a business. Those guys have contracts, and rightfully so. They were, and still are some of the greatest players that, Anaheim's seen and some of the game has ever seen. But, it's just one of those things of, I got to a point where I tried to change my swing and try to hit for more homers, which that just wasn't me. And that's the only time I ever really failed. So I don't even really think I failed in my minor league or big league career if I had the the consistent at bats or whatnot, it just got to a point where, the game started to change, and it was changing from an aspect that I wasn't very good at.
Yeah, and you probably know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyways. Who is the big league pitcher that you absolutely owned at the plate the most?
Oh, shoot, I don't even know.
4 for 9 against him. Who am I thinking of?
I have no clue.
David Price, 4 for 9 against David Price with a couple of ribbies when he was one of the elite arms in the American League.
I was going to say that. I was thinking it was either going to be that. I kind of thought I had good numbers off of you, Darvish, too. Maybe not, but
it was like
yeah, no,
David Price. I looked, it was David Price, Mark Burley, pretty good numbers there too. And there's another left-hander in the mix, and I'm blanking on who it was. But yeah, David Price, the big one.
That all comes down to Howie Kendrick. Talk about one of the greatest, I guess, guys that studied pitchers that I've ever seen. I got lucky that he was with Anaheim for in 13 and 14, and then 15 he left us. But I mean, it was one of those things of, and I remember Burley in particular. I think he was with Toronto at the time, and he even said, he goes, "Hey, if he ever gets you down 0-2, a lot of pitchers don't like to come fastball in, but he will. 98, 99% of the time he does. Just look for it." And he said that in our hitters meeting that day. And so happens I went down 0-2 one of my bats. It's like, okay, screw it. I'm just going to set first, fastball, heater, inner half. I'm just sitting on it. I don't care if he throws me a changeup. I'm going to look foolish, but this is what I'm doing. And lo and behold, heater, inner half, I hit a ball, single 5-6 hole. I mean, it's one of those things that Howie, really was able to dissect pitchers on what they did and how they did it and why they did it. And it's just one of those things that I got lucky that I had him as a teammate for 2 years with Anaheim. And, I would give him the credit when it comes to all that stuff because, like I said, he was almost like a man amongst boys when it came to that aspect of the game.
And later became, of course, a World Series hero with the Nationals. Did playing in Anaheim, was that like the greatest thing ever being home, or was it just like, because JT Snow actually, we talked about JT Snow before we came on, but JT Snow is somebody that said, I thought it would be great coming to Anaheim and playing, but it ended up not being great. It ended up kind of being exhausting. Like there's a friend here that wants to hang out after a game. There's a family member there that wants to hang out. Was it exhausting for you, or was it kind of more like a dream come true? Like this is a place where I grew up watching games, or was it a headache?
I wouldn't say it was a headache. I mean, for me, the dream come true was when I got to play with San Fran. That was the team, again, I grew up loving and always watching. I remember whatever it was. I think it was 0-2 when the Angels beat San Fran in the World Series. I was like one of the only people at my high school that wanted the Giants to win. But I will say, playing for Anaheim, it was one of those things that was really surreal. I remember my first game, we were playing the Rangers, playing second base, kind of locked into the game. And at some point, I mean, we ended up getting our butts kicked, but at some point they started doing the wave. And I remember, I think it was like 6th or 7th inning, looking up, and kind of that surreal moment hit of standing on the field, watching the fans do the wave, and remembering back in the day, I used to be in those stands doing the wave for the guys on the team. And that was one of the cool moments of playing with Anaheim. Obviously, playing in front of friends and family is awesome, but that was one of the things I'll always remember, of just being like, this is something I'll be able to tell, my future kids of, this is something that they could possibly achieve in their lifetime, and hopefully they do.
That's awesome. Did you have to ever leave a lot of tickets for people, for friends, family?
No, not really. I was really good at the point of, if someone asked me for tickets that I hadn't heard from in a while, I was like, yeah, no, that's not happening.
Good for you. That's the way to do it. Yeah.
I mean, and then my parents really came to games that I started. And then every now and then, there'd be a good close friend of mine that was like, hey, we're going to come to the game. And most of the times, my close good friends, they would never ask for tickets. So it was just more of, oh, you're going to come to the game? Which game you coming to? Let me get you some tickets. So
yeah, I would not feel comfortable asking any player for tickets. It just doesn't seem. And it's funny because somebody, God, I'm blanking on all the people that I've had on here, but somebody also said that, hey, if you didn't come and watch me in the minor leagues, then there's no reason for me to get you tickets in the big leagues. So that's a
Yeah,
good way to look
smart.
at it too. You played with arguably one of the greatest players ever in Mike Trout. Um, how was that? What was it like playing with Mike Trout, watching him go about his business, watching his work ethic, and just watching him be a total stud? And I guess Pujols too, for that matter. Both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I got lucky. I played with some of the greatest players, definitely in our generation, and those two in particular. With the Nationals, I got to play with Scherzer and Harper. With the Giants, I got to play with Crawford and Belt, and I think at that time, Kane was there, and Peavy was there, and Posey. So I mean, I played with some of the greatest players in our generation, maybe ever. But when it came to Mike and Albert, I mean, it was just a type of thing of, you know, Trout would be able to do things that I literally dream of doing. I remember his first walk-off homer. Actually, I think may have been against Brad Boxberger, who's a good close friend of mine. I think it was a changeup low and in. And if you look at the video back, like he literally picks up his back foot, moves it towards the back of the batter's box so he has room to open up his hips to be able to turn on the changeup in. And it's just one of those things that you're just like, that shouldn't be normal. Like that shouldn't be something that you can do, and yet he does it so effortlessly. I mean, there are times he'd come in after BP, be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna hit 2 homers today," and you go, "I'd hit 2 homers." I mean, it's just like that stuff's not normal in this game, and for him, for Albert and others, it's just like I always tell my wife and good friends of mine. I mean, this game is there's a very select few in this game that this game was made for. Trout, Albert, Buster, like there's some of those people. It just comes so naturally to them, and they make it look easy when it's not.
So Trout is now building a golf course in New Jersey, I believe. It's going to be called something like Trout International. So I mean, imagine if you get to kind of give financial advice to Mike Trout again and be a part of that golf.
I don't think Trout's going to need my financial advice. I'm sure he has some people that have been in the industry for decades that are probably a little bit smarter than I am when it comes to that. But hey, Mike, if you're ever listening, you need some advice, just give me a call.
Yeah, if you need to renegotiate the Nike deal, just hit up Grant Green. Yeah. A few more seconds here before we kind of wrap up. You hit your first big league home run against Brandon Gomes and the Rays in 2013 in Anaheim. What do you remember from that swing? Opposite field too.
Yeah, nothing, just the fastball up and away. I remember coming off the bench, and it was just one of those things of, all right, well, I haven't swung the bat since about 4 in the afternoon, so let's just see what happens. And again, I got lucky that the heavy cold air in Anaheim didn't bring it down to go off the wall, and it was just something I'm always going to remember.
Is it heavy cold air there, or is it nice and because obviously we hear about Dodger Stadium being pretty nice for night games, and San Francisco, obviously, I mean, 55 is a win, 60 degrees is a win, but Anaheim, what's kind of the average temperature for those night games? Because honestly, it does look chilly sometimes, and I'm like, wow, is it really like chilly
70.
like that?
No, probably 70s, low 70s. But it's the same thing like you kind of have with San Fran. You get that dew, the cold air, ocean air coming off of down there off of Newport that comes through, and it just gets the really heavy moisture in the air, which makes it the ball not fly as well because has something knocking it down. So, but it was always really, really comfortable, and that's the one thing that I'm always gonna be one of those things of moving out to Texas now. It's like people always ask me, how do you love Texas? I love it out here. People are super nice, and it's amazing. The one thing I do miss is it being in between 72 and 85, 75% of the year.
Yeah, so. No, 100%. So your career ends, and you made the decision to go back and finish up your degree at USC, which is really cool. Is that something that was on your mind during your career? Like, I want to go back and finish. It's important.
Yeah. I mean, when it got to a point where, like I said, like I didn't see another big contract coming. That was definitely a key point of a reason why I kind of retired when I did. There was some language in the contract when I signed that I needed to go back to school within a certain time frame, and the team that drafted me was gonna, help provide some financial help for me to go back to school and finish. So that was definitely a key aspect of me retiring when I did. I didn't want to miss out on that. So, but it was one of those things. If I went back, not only just to get the degree, but to kind of see what I wanted to do next. I thought maybe I wanted to do college coaching, so I helped out with the team for a year and a half. Enjoyed it, loved it, but it just got to a point where I was engaged, was going to start a family, had already been away, through my career from family members for as long as I did, and I didn't want to do that again. So it was just, again, it was just one of those things of the degree was big, but the being able to go back and help SC baseball as little as I was able to do was probably the bigger aspect of me going back.
That's really awesome, and loving the stories. This was great, Grant. I really appreciate the time, and thanks for coming on the show. And hopefully, maybe in the future, Scott Boras gets you that job, and you end up representing some of the big names in baseball. But thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And everybody could follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at RizzoCast, and then go check out the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. It is available. Thank you, everybody, for listening. More stuff coming soon, and see you next time.